Right. Folks are hopping on. Good numbers. Hey, Jenny, good morning.
Good morning.
Lots of folks, last minute crowd. Okay, we'll wait one more minute and then we'll go ahead and get started. And I will issue my obligatory, we are recording this webinar. So just keep that in mind. And the plan is to actually host the recording of this on our YouTube channel for MSD-LIVE, so that folks that are conflicted and can't make it can catch up. All right. I don't see anyone else in the waiting room, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us on really what's like a celebratory day. It's the webinar announcing the version 1 release of the MSD-LIVE platform. I know most of you are familiar with the platform. Some of you may be newcomers. So the way this is going to work is we're going to have a brief message here at the start from our sponsor, Bob Valerio, who's graciously joined us. And then I'll go through like a really brief slide deck on 8 to 10 slides, sort of giving an overview of MSD-LIVE and what we are and where we're trying to go. And then the bulk of the time here is actually going to be spent walking through the platform and demonstrating some of the features that are in the V1 release and showing you how to use it. So we're really excited about that. And then we'll have time for questions at the end. And as I mentioned, this is being recorded for the folks that can't make it live. So just keep that in mind. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bob to say a few words.
I'll try to keep this brief, uncharacteristically for me. So, but what I'd like to do is acknowledge, that this is really a journey that started many years ago at for those of you that used to attend our annual Snowmass meetings. The recognition and need for such capability was mentioned and discussed repeatedly, both in large groups and actually in smaller sessions and conversations. And it was made more important by our march toward increased teaming and collaboration, something we started in earnest around 7 to 8 years ago, made only stronger through time, giving rise to what we're seeing now, which is a fully functioning community of practice and a bona fide structured community of practice with, not so ironically, a working group on this very topic. We also, as I reflect, we also engaged the interagency players through the Coastal Integrated Hydroterrestrial Modeling Workshop, co-sponsored by the MSD Community and Community of Practice and the U.S. Global Change Research Program Interagency CIHTM Working Group, where we had a deliberate session on this topic. And it's really a culmination of where we are now. I have to say, I appreciate P&L taking the lead and serving as a community steward in this with a strong community perspective and spirit in mind. And with something like this, they needed to build trust within the community. And I feel confident in saying that they did, and you responded in kind. So it's the only reason this whole thing is working. And this manifests in many ways. I'm notably impressed really with the significant turnout at the regularly scheduled meetings. I pop into probably more than not of those. And it's a strong indication that you found and helped created value added here. A great example of community-based design. And this also brings me to some of the phasing and priorities. I had originally perceived this when it first started as strictly a data portal, but because of your various inputs and needs and contributions, and Casey's leadership, it's evolved into so much more with a focus on data, software hosting, and community teaming and development spaces that, if you pardon the expression, it really is live. So it's kind of a fantastic evolutionary story for this. You should be aware, if you aren't already, that we recently elevated this from a distributed cost project to a dedicated, separate DOE-funded project. The intent is to grow it over time as needs and opportunities emerge and as we gauge how it's doing and how much community interest, use, and, for lack of a better term, community pull we see. So I would be remiss in not calling out how this effort has really benefited from Casey's leadership, first as an IM3 funded task. By the way, thank you, Jenny, for your support for that. And then as a distributed cross project now for this separately funded DOE project. In hindsight, Casey was a particularly good choice to lead with his willingness to innovate, independently examine best-in-class practices, engage other groups who have attempted such efforts and hold conversations and meet with them, and then think with the mindset of community, not institution. I hope Casey mentions today as an aside, or someone else for that matter, maybe Jenny or other folks, a particularly interesting posting recently on MSD-LIVE that is a collaboration between IM3 and Hyperfacets with a new and important data set. So I don't know if those are your plans to mention that, but that's kind of a big deal. And I actually shared that not only with my colleagues, but with Gary, and he got back, he was pretty excited about that. This is Gary Gearnart, who's serving as the acting director for BER. Finally, I want to thank all of the participants from the many teams, both junior and senior alike, for working to make this really possible, this resource possible. I hope you continue to do so and to realize the benefits and continue to innovate as you already have. So thanks again, and I hope you have a great meeting.
Thanks, Bob. I really appreciate the kind words there and appreciate your support for this over a number of years, really. All right, so from now, I'm going to share my screen here and pull up a PowerPoint presentation and launch into a bit of background about MSD-LIVE, and then talk about where we are now and where we're going over the next few weeks. So can someone confirm that you can see my screen here?
I can see it.
Looks
Perfect,
good.
thanks. All right, so this webinar is to announce and celebrate our version 1 release of the platform, which we turned on yesterday. It is available for production now, and we'll talk about the capabilities that are out there right now. I want to start by just talking about the why of MSD-LIVE, and I know that many of you have seen this before, but for those of you that are new, like, we are not a traditional science project. Bob gave a nice overview here. When I think about why we exist, I go back to this talk that Brian Nosek gave at PNNL last year, and he was talking about how do you actually make a transition towards open science. And what he argued was that you start with things like infrastructure, i.e. you make it possible, and then you layer on more complex things like a user experience that makes it easy, communities around it that make it normative, and then ultimately you culminate in things like incentives and policies. And when he showed this diagram for the first time, sort of like a light bulb went off in my head, because I think you can make an argument that journals largely skipped to the top end of this pyramid, right? They made it required. MSD-LIVE is about tackling these foundational elements of the pyramid, in particular things like infrastructure and user experience that make it possible to do open science within the multi-sector dynamics community of practice. So our vision for MSD-LIVE is to be both a cloud-based data and code management system and an advanced computing platform. Really, it's all about enabling you, the community, to do your work, to document and archive your data, run your models and analysis tools, and share that data, software, and multi-model workflows within a robust community of practice. Bob mentioned that this goes back to some of the community of practice foundational meetings back at Snowmass in the mid-2010s, and has grown from there. So we view MSD-LIVE as a cornerstone capability of the MSD community of practice. In terms of timelines, we got funding in the door to actually build this in March of 2021, and our phase 1 runs through September of this year, and our v1 release is the major element of phase 1 here. So based on extensive conversations with the community during our scoping and brainstorming phase, we came up with this table of the top 10 most pressing use cases. These are challenges that you guys face on a day-to-day basis as it relates to managing and sharing your data and code. And these use cases start with relatively basic things like finding the data you need to do your work, archiving data and minting DOIs, and then gradually layering on in complexity through more complex things like controlling access and sharing data across institutions, analyzing data, multi-model workflows, machine learning and AI, and the ability to move code to the data when the data becomes too large to download or too infeasible to download. So we really designed the platform to address these 10 use cases, and I'll talk about which of these are being addressed in our version 1 release. But these are your problems. Like, we had a lot of listening sessions with project teams across the community to understand the challenges that you face. So hopefully you see that reflected in this list. For our phase one, we chose to focus on the data repository aspect of MSD-LIVE first. If you look at this table of use cases, they sort of break down into two main buckets: elements that are associated with a data repository and elements of advanced scientific computing. And for reasons that I'm happy to discuss, we chose to focus on the data repository first. There's a couple of primary reasons. One is, in talking to the project teams, this is the element of MSD-LIVE that provides immediate value to all the projects. It'll also help us to build a wide and deep user base. In terms of like the technology that we're using, we figured out that the data repository could be developed independently of some of the advanced computing elements, but the reverse is not true. And we really believe in this creed of like, the best way to provide value and build trust with our users is to focus on building complete, easy to use components and investing time to train the community how to use them. So based on that, we chose to focus on the data repository first, get a complete end-to-end product out there, and then over time, we'll layer on some of the more complex advanced computing elements of MSD-LIVE. I want to talk about a few milestones that we've accomplished over the last year as we work towards this release. The first big one was in February of this year. We released a beta version of the data repository for testing by our stakeholder group. And I'll talk a little bit about the stakeholder group in a few slides. But this was not a production system, but a complete system that worked end to end. And we really wanted lots of feedback from the community on how they use it and sort of how it fits their challenges. And we asked and you guys delivered. We got, I don't know, probably on the order of 100+ constructive comments on how to improve our original design and interface. And this was amazingly beneficial to us. It allows us to sort of tweak some of the user interface aspects of it, but also think more deeply about the technical structure. And we made changes based off the feedback that was provided by our stakeholder group. Also want to point out two sort of slightly off-path things that we delivered over the past year. In May, we actually used some of the cloud computing resources of MSD-LIVE to host a workshop based on the Mozart-Wimpy model at the CSDMS annual meeting. During this workshop, 20+ participants actually logged onto MSD-LIVE and ran the Mozart-Wimpy water management model in real time on the AWS cloud. Also this year, we helped to migrate the MSD ebook, Addressing Uncertainty in Multi-Sector Dynamics Research, to live on MSD-LIVE. And in particular, that ebook contains on-demand interactive tutorials for common UC workflows. Those are based in Jupyter notebooks. And all of the data and code supporting that lives on MSD-LIVE. You can find it from our site, or you can find the link to the ebook just by Googling the title there. And then ultimately here in August, I guess yesterday, was our v1 release to the MSD community. In terms of what's in the version 1 release, like I said, we chose to focus on the data repository first. So if you go back to this table of use cases, the first 6 use cases ranging from finding data to sharing data are all included in the v1 release. Analyze data, we're pretty close on this. We developed the Jupyter Notebook Hub as part of that CSMS workshop that I just mentioned. There's still a layer of abstraction that has to be done here. But the idea is once this element is complete, you'll be able to spin up Jupyter notebooks to analyze data that you find in MSD-LIVE. And then some of these more complex advanced computing things are things that we're starting to tackle as we move into phase 2 of the project in the next fiscal year. Okay, I want to address briefly the training and support aspect. This is something that we heard loud and clear every time we talked to the project teams. This is not a if you build it, they will come kind of thing. We're building this platform and releasing it to the community, but we also know that you want training on how to use this. So if you look through our site, we do have sort of extensive documentation, some video tutorials, and we have plans for fast response help services as you use the platform and get stuck. We also intend to do live hands-on training sessions with each of the project teams across the MSD space that want them. So if this is something that you're interested in, you can reach out to me individually, or you can work through your project representative on our stakeholder group, and we'll get something scheduled. These could be basic things like how to use the data repository, which we're going to demo here shortly. But we've also done a couple of like very targeted data and code management workshops, things like best practices for using GitHub, how to develop and use meta repositories for some of the project teams. And we're happy to repeat those workshops for other projects if they're interested and want that. One thing I'll say here is, the system is out there and we've done our best to make this a flawless system. We're well aware that there's no such thing as a flawless system. And I'll just say that we want your feedback, right? We want you to use the platform. And as you use that platform, come back to us and identify any issues that you may find with usability, what's intuitive, what's not, any pain points, areas where you think training or documentation would be helpful. Or if you find things like formatting issues or glitches or dead links, please let us know. We have a section on our site that we'll walk through about how to contact us or raise issues if you find them. I would just encourage you to not be shy, right? Like, we want this to work for the community. So if you find things that could be better, go ahead and raise those to our attention and we'll do our best to address them. For the next slide, I'm going to turn it over to Karina Lansing to talk about where we're going next over the next couple of weeks and months.
Thanks, Casey. So as Casey showed, we do have a baseline template for quickly spinning up Jupyter notebooks in the cloud, which is great because like when we did the UC ebook, we were pretty much able to set that up in about 5 minutes. But right now, those compute environments, they're isolated from MSD-LIVE data. So our next step is we want to make the changes we need in order to be able to easily connect the MSD-LIVE data to not only the notebook environment, but any other kind of compute environments that we want to set up on the cloud. And so how we're going to do that is we're going to make some modifications to our data repository that will not only make it easy to link the data to our compute environment, but also it will support large size data sets better than what our RDM environment does out of the box. One of the things that it does is it flattens all your data sets, and you can't have any like hierarchical folder trees, but that's, in large data sets, they're almost always hierarchical and have a lot of folders. And we want to preserve that because anyone that's working with that data, we want to keep the data in the same format that originally was so that their code continues to work against it. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be making some improvements to the baseline RDM infrastructure for our data repository so that each data set has its own S3 bucket and the data can go directly in there, and those buckets can be directly connected to the compute environment, and the files in the bucket will look exactly like the files in the data set. So any test code that was written to work against a specific file names and file structure, they'll continue to work. No modifications will be needed. And that will also enable us to do really fast uploads for large data sets using AWS tools like S3 Sync. And then the next thing we'll do is once we get the data in the buckets, then we're going to add some services to be able, and some core services in MSD-LIVE to be able to easily connect those. So that'll include being able to get temporary tokens to be able to authenticate and connect to the buckets, and then also be able to templates that we can reuse to be able to mount those buckets onto a container or like a virtual machine, different types of environments. And once we get that baseline template done, then we will start improving the existing templates that we have now, which is for our notebook template. So we'll add to those templates so that they will authenticate against our MSD-LIVE so that actual project users can use them. And then it will add that data set mounting into the notebooks so people can spin up notebooks and be able to work against data sets that you find in the MSD-LIVE data repository. And then we'll also we just initially started working with GSIMs, just in kind of like in the brainstorming phase right now, but we are going to be working with projects to try to add other kind of common reusable templates that all projects can leverage, such as like a quick way to spin up a website, like a Shiny website, to be able to show analytics on your large data sets that you generate. And another option is some templates for different compute cluster environments that could have like ML services or other kind of, scalable data analysis tools in there. And once we get those, they're really, it's super easy to reuse. And so we're hoping over time that we'll have this nice set of core templates for different compute environments that'll make it really easy for projects to choose which type of compute resources they need, and they can spin those up and connect to the data.
Thanks, Karina. That was really helpful, and we're really excited about where we're going next. So stay tuned for that, for what's going to be in V2 and beyond. The last slide I have here is just a series of acknowledgements. This is a project that has been near and dear to my heart for a number of years, but I can safely say that this wouldn't exist without the support from our sponsor, Bob Valerio, and the DOE MSD program area. Jay Nilo, who runs DOE's data management program, also provided a lot of support and guidance in the initial phases where we were reaching out to the community to understand your needs, and we appreciate that. Bob mentioned that in the last year, we were actually co-funded out of 3 different SFAs that were led by P&L, and we really appreciate those projects for their direct financial support of MSD-LIVE. Those were IM3, GSIMS, and the ICOM SFAs, and their PIs have been incredibly supportive from day one. Ian Kurtunis and Charlotte Geffen from P&L's program office have been, mainstays since day one, providing lots of guidance and helpful suggestions that help to tailor the idea as we work towards getting it funded. I personally, as the lead for this, want to brag on the development team. Karina Lansing, Zoe Guillen, Matt McDuff, Devin McAllister, Elvis Offer, Anna Saban, Shannon Sheridan, and John Weirs from NREL. I can't tell you how phenomenal these guys have been to work with. They are top-notch, best in class at their jobs, and it's been really great, just as the lead of this project, to see them work together and develop this. They are committed to making something that is easy to use and intuitive for the community, and they've put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this, and I sincerely appreciate their efforts. I also want to thank everyone that did testing, members of our MSD-LIVE stakeholder group. Each of the projects has a representative on our stakeholder group. When we threw the beta version out there in February, you guys went to town on it and gave us a ton of useful feedback. And then over the last month, actually, Chris Vernon, Travis Thurber, and Casey McGrath from P&L all stepped up and retested sort of the cleaned up version of this and provided a lot of really good feedback there too. So I want to call out their efforts in particular. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm actually going to turn it over to Zoe Guillen, who is our data repository lead. And Zoe's going to walk you through how to actually register for an account on our site and join projects that are currently up on MSD-LIVE.
Thanks, Casey. Is everyone able to see my screen?
Yes.
Oh, great. All right, I'm blushing a little bit from that. All the praise, I really appreciate it though. So I was just going to walk you guys through how to create an account and log in and request access to some of these projects. I'm on the dev site, so you all can rest assured that I won't be messing up with real projects. All right, so here's our MSD-LIVE website. I'm going to dev, but you'd be going to msdlive.org. And creating an account is pretty easy. This is funny. I can't see some links because of Zoom. There it is. You just click this sign up button. So I'm going to use an email. Also, let me see. The Zoom links are on top. Okay. So you enter your email. I'm going to do, we have a MSD-LIVE testing email account that I've been using. Let's see, I'll do demo@gmail.com so I can get to the email. Enter in your name and password. Hit the sign up. Now, once I do that, it's going to say you need to email or you need to verify your email. So I'm going to go over to my Gmail mailbox that email would be going to. And here's the email that you would see right after doing that. So it says you need to verify your email in order to use your MSD-LIVE account. So because of this being a testing account, I'm going to have to do that on a backdoor template or backdoor way. So bear with me one moment because our testing accounts don't quite work. So while I do that, after I sign up, you'll see, I'll make it something a little more interesting. You'll see all our list of projects here. And so what you would do after you create your account is you would start looking around for projects that you think you might want to join. And right now you'll see the join button is disabled because I'm not logged in, but once I'm able to log in, sorry, bear with me. The demo gods have wanted me to show you guys our beautiful project logos here a little while longer. I'm almost there. I have to click on my other screen a couple more times. Anyways, once you find a project of interest and you're logged in, you can push the join. Here, let me show you this. This is more interesting. Almost there. You guys want to
While
see what
Zoe's
I'm
doing that on the back end, I'll just clarify that our production site is up and you can all sign up for accounts beginning today. So feel free to register for an account whenever you're ready.
All right. Thanks for that. Let me get one more click through. I thought I could do this quickly because I've done it a million times when testing. Of course, let's see, and I've been verified. Okay. So now, once you're verified, you can log in. Normally, it would not be that painful for you all. It's just because it's testing account. Normally, all you have to do is click that link. You wouldn't have to click the 2 dozen that I just clicked. And I'm going to log in as that person I just created. demo@gmail.com. Oh, oops, sorry. Let me do one more.
I think you use the testing account email, Zoe.
Oh, yeah, let's see. Confirm account. Yeah, this testing account, it's really handy for, it's really handy for testing, but apparently not for this for demos. I think this is going to be it, guys. And yay, it let me in. Okay, so now that I've logged in, I've verified my account by clicking this link, and I've logged in, and I browsed the projects that I'm most interested in. I can request to join one. So I'm going to go ahead and request to join this Hyperfastest project. And now we can see that we have our request is pending. Here's our members that are already in there. And now I'm going to log out as an admin user so you can see, for those of you that are going to be administrators to those projects and can control your access to your teams, what that would look like. So I'm just going to log in. I think my cached passwords are not working.
Yeah, so while she's doing that, just to be clear, each project in MSD-LIVE is assigned administrators. We've worked with our stakeholder group to figure out who those initial administrators should be, and they can control access to who can join the project. So when Zoe requests to join, in this case, Hyperfacets, I believe, that would trigger an email to the administrators on the Hyperfacets project, and they can confirm or deny that request. So for those of you who are on the call who are administrators for a given project in MSD-LIVE, I would just ask you to use this power very carefully, and only admit people to your project that are directly contributing, right? If you allow them to join the project, they will have permission to upload data to MSD-LIVE, and certainly we don't want just completely random people doing that. So this is how we control access here. So Zoe's showing her screen here that she's showing up as a pending member. And if you're an administrator for the project, you'll have the confirm or deny option there.
Thanks, Casey. Yep, so here's the person that account that I just created, I'm logged as an admin now. So here's my pending request. And this, like Casey just said, this is how you can approve this person, or you can deny them. And you can also at the same time add their special roles if they need to be a curator, which means if you want them to be able to review submissions before they're accepted into the project and published, or if you want them to be an admin of the project where they can log in and they'll be able to see pending members and change other people's roles. You can do that at this step if you'd like. You can also do that later, as you can see up here on the above table. So that is how you can create an account. So I think I've showed you guys how to create an account and how to verify your email, and then how to request access to a project. And then if you're an admin, I've showed you how to accept pending members or decline them and change their roles. Once we have more people logged into the system and have accounts as a project administrator, you can also go and add them directly. If you're communicating on the side, you go, oh, I'm going to add you to my project. You could use this dialogue here to add people that already have accounts in our system to your project instead of having them go and request access.
Thanks, Zoe. That's very helpful.
Sure.
Okay. If you can stop sharing, I'll take control back over and I'll show you how to actually use the data repository.
I'm trying to stop. Maybe if you just take over. I'll try to stop.
Okay,
Okay,
I think that worked.
Yeah.
Okay, can you guys confirm that you can see my screen? Yeah. Somebody.
I can see it.
Yep, I can see it.
Okay. All right, so this is our landing page here. Again, I'm on our dev site. It should be the same as prod. I put a link to prod in the chat for the meeting. You can see I'm already logged in up here, so I'm not going to go through that as well. From our main landing page here, you have a couple of options. You can go to the project services page, which is what Zoe just demoed. We also have a getting started page down here in the bottom right, which shows you step-by-step for how to create an account, log in, join an account, or join a project, and then publish data and code. So if you're very, very new to the site, you may want to go here first. We have a little bit about computational resources where we highlight things that are up there now, in particular the uncertainty characterization ebook, and over time we'll be adding more to this page. But the primary thing I want to walk through is the data repository. Was somebody trying to jump in with a question, or am I just hearing blips? Just hearing blips. Okay. So if you want to get to the MSD-LIVE data repository, you can click right here, data and code repository, and it'll take you to this landing page where you have two main options. One is you can discover, so you can search for data that's been uploaded by other users and projects. In our case on prod right now, we don't actually have any data sets, so this would return an empty page. Or you can submit data. So if you want to add new data to MSD-LIVE, you would do it via this submit data feature here. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and submit a new data set to MSD-LIVE. So this is our data set upload page. And what you'll see is there's a couple of different main sections. The first is how do you actually get your files in? And right now there's two options. You can drag and drop your files, or you can do an upload. In my case, what I'm going to upload is a talk I gave at AGU last year. So I'll just go to my folder and find that talk. There it is, and upload the PowerPoint. So if I click open, then it'll go ahead and give me a progress bar and show the progress on uploading that. As Karina mentioned, right now we're only accepting flat file structures. So if you're uploading a data set, that data set needs to be zipped into a zip file. So it's a single file that goes in. We're in the process of doing adding a command line uploader here so that you can get larger data sets in and maintain that file structure as they go into MSD-LIVE. And we have a note here. If you're trying to upload a file larger than 1 terabyte, please reach out to us. We do have some backdoor ways to do this in the meantime that'll make your life substantially easier. Okay, so I can see that the file's actually been uploaded. You can see the file name and the size here. And then you move into the metadata section. So the first metadata field here is associated with a DOI. And you have three options. One is I do not need a DOI. I already have a DOI. This would be pretty rare, or I need a DOI. In this case, this talk does not have a DOI associated with it. So I'll click this radial button saying I need a DOI, and then it'll open this green icon that says get a DOI now. What this actually does is interfaces with a DOE system ran by the Office of Scientific and Technical Information, or OSTE, who are sort of the DOI brokers for the Department of Energy. So when I click the green button, it will actually give me that code that you need for the DOI. This is not official yet until you publish the data set, right? So I haven't published it. So this DOI is not an official record until we actually publish the data set. And even then, their system processes overnight. So if you meant a DOI for your data set, it could take up to 24 hours for that to be apparent in the production system. The next field is the resource type. This is where you actually describe what it is that you're uploading. And we, excuse me, developed this list with the input of our stakeholder group. So the primary options down here are data sets. And you can clarify if it's derived data, model output, observation, or sort of research analysis or post-process data. We have multiple fields for presentations, posters, talks, video recordings. If you want to link to a publication that you did, you can add the publication record to MSD-LIVE through there. And then we have some software options down here as well. If you're adding software to MSD-LIVE, you can choose those. In my case, what I'm uploading is a talk. So I'm just going to select the research type, presentation, talk. And then you go into common metadata fields. So you're going to assign a title to your data set. In my case, this is just an AGU talk. So I'll just put the title there. The publication date defaults to the current date. But if you had already published this elsewhere, or if your data set has some specific date associated with it, for some reason, you can indicate that here. The next field is creators. This is where you describe, all right, who contributed to this data set and in what way. So in my case, this was a talk that I did, so I'll go ahead and put my information in here. You can see that there's fields for like ORCID IDs. If you want to add your ORCID, you can put your affiliation, P&L for me. And then finally, you can select the roles. And for this, we actually adopted the credit system. So if you guys have published papers in the last couple of years, you may have been asked to use the credit system, the credit taxonomy, for describing who did what associated with the paper. So we're borrowing that taxonomy. So when you're adding data to MSD-LIVE, you can describe the role of each person and how they contributed to that. So in this case, for this talk, it was probably conceptualization is the best fit. And so I'll go ahead and add that, and I can save. So it shows up, I'm one creator. I obviously had co-authors on this talk, so I can add the co-authors as well. But for the sake of time, I'm not gonna do that in this demo. The next field is a description. This is like an open response field where you can use this to describe your data set. In this case, I'm gonna be quite brief and just put, it was my AGU talk from 2021. But we really encourage you to be verbose here and put as much information as you think folks would need in order to have sort of confidence in reusing your data set. This is the primary field, but if you want to add more supporting information, we have a button here where you can add that. And you'll see that there's drop-down types here. So if there were a methods document associated with your data set, you could go ahead and select the methods from the supporting information. So on and so forth. In my case, because what I'm uploading is a talk, I'll go ahead and add the abstract for that talk and paste it into this field. So there you go. So that's supporting information. You can do this as many times as you want. So if you have more than one field, you can add more pieces of supporting information. The next is going to have you select a license. In this case, it defaults to CCA 4. But we have the option to do standard licenses here. So if you click that option to add a standard license, you'll see sort of our recommended license. These are sort of community accepted best practices license, but we also have standard licenses for data and software independently, and you can select those from this field here. Or if you really want, you can add your custom license. I'm not a lawyer. I can't advise you as to which custom license you should be using for your data set. I will say on our resources page on MSD-LIVE, we do have a video tutorial on how to select the appropriate license for your work. So then the next section down here is you move into metadata that's specific to multi-sector dynamics science. The first field is the project associated with the data set. In my case, this was a talk I did with IM3, but I'll go ahead and say, Chris Vernon was a co-author on this and he's associated with GSIMS. So I'll go ahead and add GSIMS as a result, and they're not showing up in our dev site. We'll use Peaches as an example. So this is, if it's a collaboration across multiple projects, you can reflect that here. You will be asked to select one project to review the data for when you actually submit it. And I'll talk about that review process, but you should think about who should be the reviewer when you do that. And it's just a drop-down field, so you can select from there. And then you go into MSD specific things like sectors and systems. These are common sort of focus areas that our community is working on. In this case, it doesn't really work for my talk, but I'm just going to select one as an example. We also have a field for scenarios. This is particularly relevant for folks doing projections into the future. So if your data set is associated with a common climate or population scenario, you can select that from the drop-down field here. You can also do open response here and enter your own scenario. Temporal resolution, if your data is a time series, for example, hourly or so on and so forth, you can indicate that here. We do have a spatial metadata widget. We're not quite ready to roll that out yet. We still have a few final bugs, but that should come out in our v1.1 release, something like that. And then the final MSD specific field is models. So if your data set is associated with a common multi-sector dynamics model, for example, GCAM or GCAM USA, you can indicate that here. You can also freeform and put your own model. And the reason we have this sort of very specific metadata is as we get more and more data in the data repository, this is going to help downstream users find what they're looking for. So in the search field, when you're searching the data repository, you can search by model, scenario, resolution, so on and so forth, and it'll become easier to find what you're looking for. We do have an area where you can put in some keywords here if you want, or you can assign a version to your data set. If you don't put anything in here, it will be automatically assigned a version, but if you put a version in here, it'll override that. Alternate identifiers, if your data is uploaded elsewhere, and for example, you're referencing something that has a URL, you can put that URL in here and reference it as a metadata field. The final one I want to talk about, though, is related works. This is probably the most powerful metadata field that we have. This is just, you can use this field to describe how your data set in MSD-LIVE relates to other data sets in MSD-LIVE. So for example, if your data is derived from a set of model source code, you can indicate that here by saying the relationship. In this case, the data is, let's see, what's the best one? Is compiled by and model source code. And if that model source code has a DOI, you can put that DOI here and add the field. What this is going to allow us to do is describe how data relates to other data and data relates to other software in MSD-LIVE. I think this is really important for MSD science, where we often have these trains of models where model A produces output, which is ingested into model B. You can use this related works metadata field to describe that flow, so that if someone finds one element of that workflow, they can sort of trace back and see how it's connected to other elements. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and delete this field for now for the sake of this demonstration. So now that I have all my metadata in here, I'll go up into the top right here and I'll see I have a few options. I can save this as a draft and it'll say, all right, the record was saved successfully. If I had some metadata field incorrect or incomplete, it would throw an error and you would see that up here in the top and you would have an opportunity to correct that. You can also do a preview. This will show what the record would look like in MSD-LIVE once it's published. So this just shows the landing page. So title, authors, how to cite it would be on there, and then the files, and then that MSD specific metadata that's down here. Okay, so I'm going to go back to edit. I think this looks pretty good. It's all like I want it. So the next option, I'll talk about the visibility in just a second. But once you're satisfied with how it is, you can go ahead and submit that for review. And what this is going to do is it's going to go into the curation step. each project is assigned a curator or a set of curators who review records that have been requested to be added to their project. And they're going to be looking for things like metadata completeness, making sure all the files are there, so on and so forth. So that review step is really critical for making sure that like the data set's reusable to the extent possible. So I'm going to hold off on clicking that. I'll talk briefly about the visibility set here. You can choose to make your data public or restricted. If you do restricted, you can choose it will only be accessible by users on your project team. If you do public, you can do the files are public or the files are restricted, but the metadata is public, meaning it would show up in there, but in order to actually get access to the file, you would have to be a member of that project team. The other option is if you choose restricted, you can apply an embargo. If you have a particularly high profile data set that's associated with like a paper in Nature or something like that, you may not want to release it until that paper comes out. So we have the option to do an embargo record where you can set the date and provide a reason to restrict access to that until a certain date, at which point it would become public and visible. So I'll go ahead and click submit for review. It'll give you this this last dialog here saying, all right, check this and make sure that you know that the IM3 curators will have access to this. And if your upload is accepted, it will be immediately published. You can also provide a message to the curators. So if there's something that you want feedback on, like, I need you to review the metadata, or can you download this file and make sure it downloads correctly? You can have that dialogue with the curators here. In my case, I'm going to go ahead and leave it blank and I'll submit it for review. Okay, as it so happens, I'm conveniently a curator on the IM3 project, so it goes immediately into my curation queue. If you are a curator on a project, you can also go to the My Request option from the Data Repository tab up here, and it'll show you all the data sets that are in your queue for review. So we have some relatively brief instructions for the reviewers, basic things to check. Is the record associated with your project? Is the metadata complete? Is there anything else that would make it more reusable, so on and so forth? And we also have this dialogue feature down here where you can have a conversation with the dataset creator through the comment feature where you can request, all right, can you add more information here? This wasn't clear to me, add this author, so on and so forth. And you can do that through the comment feature down here. If this is all set up like we want, I'll go ahead and do accept and publish, and this will make the record final in MSD-LIVE. Okay, so the final thing I'll show, and then we'll stop and take some questions, is how to actually search for data. So I just added a record here. So if you go to Discover, it will show you all the data sets that's in MSD-LIVE, and in which case, in this case, like you can see the file I just uploaded here. I'd also done this as a demo last week for the IM3 project, so the same record's in there. This is on our dev server, so it doesn't really matter. If you want to drill down as we get more and more data in here, you can use these toggle switches on the left to search by project or scenario or sector and system or model or so on and so forth. And it'll triage that and sort of limit the data that you're exposed to. And it should make it easier to find what you're actually looking for. Okay, with that, I'm going to stop talking and open the floor to questions or comments if anyone has them. Anything that could be more clear or so on and so forth. I don't know if there's a raised hand feature in Zoom. It's been a while since I've used it, but if you have questions, go ahead and there we go. Jenny, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Casey. As you were talking, and of course I have heard this before, it occurred to me that some people might wonder about data sets that have been created in non-MSD projects that might be used and useful in MSD. And so I think there's potentially two scenarios. One is where that data set already has a Zenodo DOI. Would we want to give it a MSD-LIVE DOI? Does that ever happen? Or if it doesn't have a DOI yet, but it wasn't funded by an MSD project, right? See, but you're going to use it in an MSD project. Can we still associate it? Can we still, how would that work? Have you guys thought about a use case like that?
Yeah, so in that case, you can do what's called a metadata only record. So assuming the data lives somewhere else, like Zenodo or some other data repository, one of the options when you do the upload is to do a metadata only record. And what that essentially does, it just says there are no files associated with this upload, right? You want to commit it to MSD-LIVE, you can get a DOI for it, but the files itself are not going to be part of the record. So if you do that, it will disable the file upload portion up here at the very top. And then it becomes critically important to use these other fields, in particular, the alternate identifiers down here, to reflect where that data actually lives. So in the case that you just gave, like if the data is in Zenodo and has a DOI associated, I guess in this case, it doesn't really work with DOIs, but you could do a URL. That's an option down here, and put in the URL here. And then when you publish this, it will essentially just create a landing page for this with that URL that redirects the data that's hosted elsewhere. Thanks for that. Other questions? Kind of a quiet crowd. Okay, as you guys brainstorm that, maybe I'll just walk through some other elements on our site. So if you go to our landing page, we do have an about page where we describe sort of who we are and what we're trying to do. You can find information about our team and our stakeholder group. We also have a news and events page. We've done a number of workshops and training events, including this presentation is on here as well. We'll keep this up to date as we schedule more of those into the future. So if you're interested in what we're doing or like the outreach that we're doing, you can find that here. The resources page, I think, is actually quite useful. Here, we've worked with Shannon Sheridan, who's a research librarian at PNL, to create a series of videos that are sort of best practices for managing your data and code. So you'll see a few here, like how to create README, how to choose a license, how to name your files and structure your folder hierarchy. These are shortish, like 5 to 6 minute videos, sort of overviewing this. If you don't feel like watching the video, we've also created these summary files, which are just one page. It'll go ahead and download it there. One page sort of highlights on how to apply licenses in this case, where we show best practices, some common license, and then a brief blurb there. And then the slide deck that's underpinning the video. We do anticipate building out this portion of our site as we continue to move forward. Certainly, if there are things that you need clarification on or if we're getting like a series of common questions where we get the same question over and over, we'll go ahead and do a video on that, and then we can just point people to the video, which should alleviate some headaches, we think. So go ahead and check that out on our resources page as well. Okay. Any other questions or comments? I see something in the chat. Chris is saying it worked well. Yeah, Chris, you're an admin and a curator on GSONs, I think. So for those of you that are admins, you will get emails when users request to join your project. Go ahead and triage those as you see fit. If you're getting too few or too little emails, let us know. That's something that we can customize. We have like a best guess at what should go out at this stage, but we're happy to adapt that as well. And Adam has some great feedback there. Great set of items on the resources page. Thanks, that's very helpful. Okay. Final questions and comments. Okay, Pat.
Just as you accumulate resources and products from the projects, just kind of curious of the find and outward display in terms of what's in and how to find it.
Yeah, so the primary way to find things right now is through our search interface, and I showed an example of that. I don't think I'm sharing my screen anymore, but if you go to our data repository landing page, there's a discover button on there. And certainly we tried to keep the metadata as granular as possible to make that search as easy as possible. We're also interested in doing sort of landing pages for featured data sets. Bob mentioned the thermodynamic global warming data that was generated by IM3 and hyperfacets. And in that case, we actually created we work with the IM3 scientist, Travis Thurber, to create a landing page for that, hosted in MSD-LIVE, where it sort of describes the data in as much detail as possible, and how it was created and so on and so forth. Lots of metadata, describes all the individual variables that are in there as well. Right now, this is the only featured data set landing page that we have in there, but we're open to creating more, and ideally, we'll have some, I'm not sharing my screen, there we go. We'll have some sort of a template system that makes it easier to do this moving forward. Travis put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into creating this landing page, which looks phenomenal. But ideally, we want to make that easier to do as we move forward. Okay. Jenny, one last question.
Okay, this is actually more of a quick comment. So anyhow, I just think this is a great advancement. Want to thank you guys and the whole team. And just want to say to, I guess, all the other PIs and other members of the MSD community that, the data, this whole system is only going to be as good and as useful as the volume and quality of the information that we put into it. And so, yeah, there's other places to get DOIs. You may have internal things like we have at P&L, we have Data Hub, there's always Zenodo. But if we can all get ourselves in the mode of using MSD-LIVE for all of our DOIs, it's going to pay off in the long run. So I just wanted to really encourage that. And we may have to remind ourselves to do that. You may need to set up some internal project processes for that. And we are doing that in IM3, for example, so that we're going to commit to doing this in the future. So just wanted to share that perspective.
Yep, totally agree, Jenny. Thumbs up from Adam. He's on board too. Okay. All right, I don't see any other questions or comments in the chat, so I'm happy to end 2 minutes early. I want to thank you all for attending. Excuse me. Thank you all for attending and really for your support since day one. Going back to the beginning, this has been a community thing, right? Like we're leading this, but it's you guys and your voices that have risen this up to the point where we got the attention of the program managers and got this funded and developed. So it's really been a community effort from the start. We're really happy to hit this V1 release milestone, and we're going to start working tomorrow on V2 or V1.1 or whatever we end up calling it. I think after Zoe takes a day off, we're going to give Zoe a day off, and then we're going to dive back in. But thanks everyone for attending and for your support. And if you have any questions or comments, all of our contact is on the site, or you can reach out to me individually. So thanks and have a great day.
Thanks, Casey.
Great job, everyone. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.